추천템을 알아봤는데요. 그럼 이제 각자 원픽, 저희가 항상 하던 원픽을 한번 뽑아보도록 할게요.
먼저 뽑으실래요?
네.
네, 뽑으세요.
저 이거예요.
오.
제가 아까도 말씀드렸다시피 저는 사실 몸에 열이 많은 사람이라서 그 쿨링을
맞죠.
조금 평소에 이거를 좀 열을 좀 뭔가 내려주는 거에도 좋은 것 같아가지고 편리하기도 하고 눈 자주 붓잖아요.
그쵸.
그래서 눈 붓기 뺄 때
맞아.
진짜 좋을 것 같아요.
저도 약간 고민을 했어요.
네.
이거랑 제가 뽑을 제품이랑 고민했는데 저 같은 경우에는
네.
바로 이겁니다. 사실 제가 확실히 입술이 엄청 건조하다 보니까
네.
이런 거 저도 밤에 이렇게 바로 자거든요. 좀
네네네.
두꺼운 거.
네.
근데 방금 발랐을 때 살짝 별로 안 발랐는데도 불구하고 좀 뭔가 느낌이 좋았어. 보송보송하니. 그래서 저는 이 제품을 골랐습니다.
이제 이 시간은 또 저희의 힐링 타임.
그렇죠.
이죠.
그렇죠. 이 팁을 한번 꾸며보도록 하겠습니다.
좋습니다.
자, 렛츠고!
렛츠고!
난 이 브랜드 본연의 그거를 살릴 거야. 저는 순수 예술을 추구하기 때문에 뭐 스티커나
네.
이런 거에 도움을 받기보다는
네.
제 순수의 미술 실력으로 승부를 보겠다는 마인드입니다. 이게 사실 더 힘들잖아요. 이게 더 힘들어요. 이거 완전 순수 제가 다 하니까 뭐 자리는 수망하지 맙시다.
아 죄송해요. 그 거기다가 하시는 줄 알고. 기억 안 나죠? 뭘 해야 될지 모르겠죠? 그래 붙이는 게 낫단 게.
아니에요. 완전 떠올라 버렸죠. 생각이 대충 이렇게 생겼잖아요. 오, 잘 그렸다. 이제 여기다 음영 내면 컨투어링 하면 돼요, 일단.
형 다 했어?
다 했어.
나도 거의 다 했어. 이것만 하면 끝.
너무 너 완전 초심을 잃었구나.
왜?
너무 뭐가 없는데?
뭐가 없어. 끝. 제목은 스노우맨. 이게 태양인데 이걸 안에를 좀 시원하게 만들었습니다. Summer hates snowman. 여름은 스노우맨을 싫어한다. Now you can enjoy sunshine outside. 이 제품만 있다면 나가서 놀아도 된다. 그런 표현을 하고 싶었고요. 또 여기에서 제가 만든 스노우맨입니다. 귀엽죠? 누가 봐도 딱 시원해 보이잖아. 형 너무 칙칙하다.
아니야. 보지 마세요, 아직.
칙칙하다.
오버 섹실리.
와.
왜냐? 입술이 이제 예뻐지면은 섹시 립이 되는 건데
네.
촉촉 입술.
촉촉 입술.
지금 속으로 뭐 쓸말 없어가지고 썼다고 생각하시는 것 같은데 절대 아닙니다. 너무 길면 안 돼요, 작품에.
네, 짧고
딱
굵게.
짧고 굵게.
네, 오늘 특별히 또 눈코입 살려주는 관리템이라 주제로 리뷰해봤는데요.
네.
네, 관리라는 건 정말 끝이 없는 것 같습니다.
끝이 없어요.
예.
본인의 얼굴에 아쉬운 점을 보완해 줄 수 있는 제품이니 한국 방문하시면 무조건 사용하시길 바라겠습니다.
네, 그럼 다음 주에
만나요. 안녕. 오버나이트.
스노우맨.
In our headlines on this Thursday, June 11th, here in South Korea, President Lee Jae-myung is now in Italy, having ended his agenda in Brussels that also included talks with EU leaders regarding North Korea's nuclear weapons and broader trade interests. Meanwhile, for the first time in about a year and a half, South Korea witnessed a drop in employment last month, with the fall acutely felt in the sectors of agriculture and manufacturing. Elsewhere, consumer prices climb over 4% on year in the US in May to post their highest in 3 years, but Donald Trump chooses to make light of the surge. President Lee Jae-myung is now in Italy, the second leg of his Europe tour, having concluded his agenda in Belgium that also included talks with leaders of the European Union regarding North Korea's nuclear weapons and bilateral trade interests. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yoo-jin reports.
President Lee Jae-myung's last stop in Brussels was the European Union headquarters, marking the first such visit by a Korean president in 8 years. There, he held talks with European Council President Antonio Costa and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. The summit concluded with a 36-point joint statement. One of the strongest messages concerned North Korea and Russia. The two sides strongly condemned what they described as illegal military cooperation between Pyongyang and Moscow. They also reaffirmed that North Korea will never be recognized as a nuclear weapon state and expressed concern over its nuclear and ballistic missile programs.
북핵 문제 해결과 한반도 평화 정착을 위해 유럽연합의 변함없는 지지와 건설적인 역할을 당부드렸고 우리 양측이 함께 협력해 나가기로 뜻을 모았습니다.
Trade was another major focus. Korea and the EU, its third largest trading partner, signed a digital trade agreement. The 40-chapter deal replaces the e-commerce section of their free trade agreement, which took effect in 2011.
It will ensure safe and reliable data flow. It will boost e-commerce, and it will harmonize our consumer protection standards.
And with the EU set to tighten its steel safeguard measures from July, the Blue House says President Lee called for fair treatment for Korean steelmakers, citing Seoul's status as both a strategic and free trade partner. The revised rules will nearly halve tariff-free import quotas across 30 steel product categories, while shipments exceeding those limits will face a 50% tariff. On security, Korea and the EU agreed to launch negotiations on a security information agreement. This would establish a legal framework for sharing and protecting classified information, paving the way for closer industrial and defense cooperation. After wrapping up his 2-day visit to Belgium, President Lee has arrived in Italy, the second leg of his 10-day trip to Europe. His state visit begins with a meeting with Italian President Sergio Mattarella. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
And while we await details of the latest talks between President Lee Jae-myung and his Italian counterpart Giorgia Meloni in Rome on this Thursday, my colleague Oh Soo-young reached out to Italy's top diplomat here in Seoul for her thoughts on the future course of bilateral ties. Do take a listen.
Beyond food, fashion and Ferraris, Korea and Italy are looking to build a partnership focused on the industries and strategic challenges of the future. That's according to Emilia Gato, ambassador of Italy to Korea, who says President Lee Jae-myung's visit to Rome is expected to deepen cooperation in areas ranging from space and semiconductors to critical minerals and economic security. The visit comes months after Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni travelled to Seoul in January.
More forward-looking content between our cooperation. In fact, the two leaders spoke a lot about high-end technology sectors cooperation. For example, space may be number one. You know, in space, Korea has very high ambitions, and Italy can be a very good partner.
The two countries have already established cooperation between their space agencies and are also exploring opportunities in biotechnology, pharmaceuticals, semiconductors and scientific research. The focus on future industries is shaping business ties.
The business first Italian-Korean Business Forum was held in September last year, and it was really a success. And we decided, for the reason I was explaining before, that we wanted to focus on the F sector, the future sector, the fourth F sector, biotechnology, industrial automation, robotics, and we had energy transition, digital, transition also, and environment transition. We want to have follow-up, and we will continue to focus on that.
Another growing priority is economic security. As competition intensifies over critical minerals and advanced technologies, both countries are looking to diversify supply chains and secure the resources needed for future industries. Seoul and Rome have discussed combining development partnerships with Africa in joint efforts to secure critical raw minerals.
We want to go together. Why? Because not only because we have the same interest and the same target, and objective, but also because we share the same values.
On that note, gov't says Korea and Italy and the European Union as a whole can be reliable partners for each other, as conflicts and security risks in one region increasingly affect the other. The ambassador also highlighted growing people-to-people ties, from city partnerships, student exchanges, and even karaoke nights, bringing Koreans and Italians together at the embassy in Seoul. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, findings by the Culture Ministry here show the Lee Jae-myung administration's balanced diplomatic approach made quite a bit of foreign media headlines during its first year in office, as did the country's chips and culture. Our correspondent Chung Hae-rim has more.
Research shows that South Korea drew significant attention from foreign media outlets from June 2025 to May 2026. According to the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism, an AI-based analysis of nearly 65,000 articles from 67 media outlets across 19 countries found that political and diplomatic issues accounted for the largest share of coverage of South Korea over the past year. Political and diplomatic issues accounted for the largest share of coverage, followed by business, the economy, culture, and technology. The ministry said many foreign outlets focused on what they described as the Lee administration's, quote, pragmatic approach to diplomacy. The Washington Post said Seoul was attempting a delicate balance, while the Financial Times and The Economist pointed to a more practical and balanced foreign policy approach. For the economy sector, Reuters and Fortune described the country as an important part of global AI and chip supply chains, while also noting the strong performance of South Korea's stock markets. Meanwhile, the country's cultural influence remained one of its strongest assets. For 10 out of the 12 months analyzed, the most positively covered topics were linked to the Korean wave, including K-pop and Korean content. The analysis also found positive assessments of South Korea's democratic resilience, although some reports continued to focus on political polarization, legal investigations involving former officials, and concerns over labor and governance issues. Chung Hae-rim, Arirang News.
In other news now, for the first time in about a year and a half, South Korea witnessed a drop in employment, with the fall acutely felt in the sectors of agriculture and manufacturing. Our Kim Do-yeon tells us why.
Korea's labor market has recorded its first job loss in 17 months, driven by the mounting economic toll of the prolonged war in the Middle East. According to the Ministry of Data and Statistics on Thursday, the total number of employed people fell by 40,000 on year to 29.12 million in May. This marks the first contraction since December 2024. The manufacturing and agricultural sectors absorbed the heaviest blows, shedding a combined 261,000 positions. The government points out that these external geopolitical shocks are finally manifesting in domestic factories.
It seems to take considerable time for rising oil prices to cause supply chain difficulties for companies, and for those effects to then impact employment. If the Middle East war had ended in a short period, it might have ended without such an impact, but as it continues, the accumulated effects likely resulted in the negative figures this month.
This corporate hesitation is hitting younger job seekers the hardest. The employment rate for those aged 15 to 29 dropped by 2.4 percentage points, pushing their unemployment rate to 7.2%. The global supply chain pressures are fundamentally reshaping domestic recruitment strategies.
When external factors like the Middle East war arise, companies inevitably delay hiring new people, which directly impacts young people seeking jobs. The shift toward hiring experienced workers has also heavily affected employment for those in their 20s.
Acknowledging the situation, Finance Minister Koo Yoon-chul at an economic ministerial meeting on Thursday warned that these sectoral slumps must not spiral into broader job insecurity. In response, the government has eased requirements for employment retention subsidies. To specifically tackle the youth employment slump, Koo pledged to fast-track the Youth New Deal initiatives. This includes launching specialized training programs in the second half of the year to equip over 1,000 young people with skills in advanced sectors such as agentic AI. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Also on the local front, Korea's privacy regulator has fined e-commerce giant Coupang 624.7 billion Korean won, or some $408 million. According to the Personal Information Protection Commission on this Thursday, the fine includes $270 million for the breach of personal information of over 37 million customers and more than $130 million for the unauthorized tracking of online user activity and related violations. This marks the largest fine ever imposed by the regulator on a single company. The National Assembly has initiated proceedings for a parliamentary probe into the ballot paper shortage that disrupted the June 3rd local elections. The ruling Democratic Party and the main opposition People Power Party each submitted their related requests during Thursday's plenary session. While both parties agree on the need for a probe, they stand apart on its scope and method. Accordingly, negotiations are underway, with the Democratic Party targeting a formal vote on the plan of the probe by June 18th. Pundits here say NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang's latest visit to South Korea saw him leaving behind a significant footprint in the country's AI ecosystem. That being said, our business correspondent Park Chun-han revisits the partnerships forged over the past few days.
NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang's visit to Korea was supposed to be a vacation. But as well as public appearances, a powerful computing alliance has been formed. From semiconductor titans to local startups, NVIDIA is anchoring its global AI expansion directly to Korea. Unlike shared computing that mattered in the last few years, the technology is rapidly moving to third-generation agentic AI, which operates with minimal or no human guidance. Also, the alliance was highlighted through fourth-generation physical AI partnerships, which refer to systems that interact with the real world through robots, autonomous vehicles, and other physical devices. According to Hwang, Korea holds a distinct structural advantage in this next phase.
Countries that are excellent at manufacturing and heavy industry are not good at software. Countries that are very good at software are not good at heavy industry. Korea is great at all of it. This is a unique situation.
While in Korea, NVIDIA solidified massive partnerships across the entire tech spectrum. SK hynix will co-develop next-generation memory for upcoming AI supercomputers. Samsung Electronics will continue cooperation with NVIDIA on its HBM4 and HBM5 memory products, as well as its foundry business, pledging to deliver tangible results moving forward. SK Telecom and Neighbor are launching gigawatt-scale AI factories. Neighbor said it plans to expand its AI infrastructure into Europe and the Middle East beyond the Asia-Pacific region. Hyundai Motor and LG are integrating NVIDIA's platforms to pioneer humanoid robots and smart manufacturing solutions. As global tech giants and leading nations race to advance their AI ecosystems, Korea's unique strengths across both software and manufacturing have made it an indispensable player. However, the challenge moving forward is how to sustain this AI momentum without compromising domestic technological sovereignty. Park Junan, Arirang News.
In the Middle East now, there have been more U.S. strikes against Iran as ordered by President Donald Trump, raising concerns about the fate of the two countries' fragile ceasefire. Our An Sung-jin has the latest.
The United States has launched additional military strikes against Iran after President Donald Trump said U.S. forces would hit the country hard amid stalled negotiations. U.S. Central Command, or CENTCOM, announced that the launches began around 5 p.m. on Wednesday Eastern Time, describing them as a series of self-defense strikes. According to Fox News, Trump stated that 49 Tomahawk missiles had been fired. The U.S. did not disclose the specific locations or facilities targeted, though the defense secretary had earlier indicated that key Iranian facilities could be among the targets.
Because Iran has a chance to make a good deal, a great deal, to codify what they said they've been willing to do, and they haven't been willing to do it.
Trump had also mentioned that Iranian infrastructure, including power plants and bridges, could be targeted, saying he had the ability to neutralize such facilities if necessary. CENTCOM further stated that the action was in response to what it called Iran's unwarranted and continued aggression. Following the U.S. strikes, Iran's top military command announced the complete closure of the Strait of Hormuz, with Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy allegedly targeting 2 ships in the strait. The IRGC has also reportedly targeted military bases hosting U.S. troops in the region, including bases in Bahrain and Kuwait. The U.S. strikes on Wednesday night follow U.S. retaliatory attacks launched earlier this week after an American Army helicopter was shot down in a drone attack allegedly from Iran, with Trump adding that evidence recovered from the crash site confirmed Iran's involvement. Following those strikes, Trump told reporters at the White House on Wednesday that we're going to hit them hard again today. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian dismissed Trump's threats, describing them as a sign of desperation rather than strength. In a post on social media, the Iranian president said threats against critical infrastructure reflected Washington's frustration and pledged to withstand any pressure through national unity. Trump has maintained that a diplomatic agreement with Iran remained within reach and that the two sides are very close to a deal. However, he claims that Iran needs to sign the final document and accuses Tehran of delaying the process. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
And Mr. Trump has also chosen to make light of soaring U.S. consumer prices, which hit over 4% on year in May, the highest in 3 years. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump has defended a recent rise in inflation, arguing that higher prices linked to the conflict with Iran will ease once the war ends. Speaking to reporters on Wednesday, Trump responded to government data showing consumer inflation rose at its fastest pace in 3 years in May. Asked whether the increase could hurt Republicans ahead of November's midterm elections, Trump said he loved the inflation, insisting it is temporary and largely driven by energy costs.
You know what I really love? I love the inflation. Oh, when the war is over, it's coming down. I know you can't. It's going to come down like a rock.
The president revealed that he has approved a plan to secretly move oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz to help prevent further disruptions to global energy supplies. Trump described the operation as successful and said it was worth the risk. The remarks come as the war with Iran continues to disrupt shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, helping drive up the cost of gasoline, fertilizer, and other goods. Experts also point to the conflict in the Middle East as the main reason for U.S. consumer inflation.
The main story here, headline inflation is up 4.2% on an annual basis. That's the highest we've seen in 3 years since May of 2023. Most of that move is due to energy prices, gasoline prices in particular, from the conflict in the Middle East.
Meanwhile, Wall Street ended lower on Wednesday, with major indexes falling more than 1% as investors weighed rising inflation, weakness in chip stocks, and renewed tensions between Washington and Tehran. Concerns also grew after Trump suggested the U.S. could resume attacks on Iran and warned on social media that Tehran would pay the price if negotiations continue to stall. Also, both Brent crude and U.S. crude futures closed up nearly $2 per barrel on Wednesday, amid concerns that the conflict in the Middle East could escalate further. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Back here in South Korea, curtains have gone up for this year's Busan content market, and our Cho Young-un was there for a glimpse of the latest screen productions and partnerships making headlines.
From newly unveiled Korean dramas recognized at the Cannes International Series Festival to AI-generated feature films, some of the year's most anticipated productions are on show in the southeastern coastal city of Busan. Among the most anticipated titles is Sacred Jewel, whose cast and creators, including actors An Bo-hyun, Soo-hyun, and Lee Sang-min, appear to meet the audience. The series was invited to the non-competitive section of the 9 series in April and drew attention again at the Busan content market ahead of its release.
It was exciting and truly an honor to share the film with international audiences. Presenting it in Busan again before its official release is especially meaningful, and I'm very grateful.
Content created with artificial intelligence is also taking center stage at this year's market. Genfluencer, directed by Hyun Hae-ri, has attracted attention as the first Cannes series selected feature-length film with roughly half of its footage generated using AI. Starring actress Bae Yoon-kyung, the film showcases the potential of AI in content creation and storytelling.
In the past, directors often had to give up certain scenes because of budget constraints. With generative AI, I was able to create the scenes I envisioned without those limitations. I believe Genfluencers will be an experiment unlike anything seen before.
Beyond screenings and showcases, the market is facilitating business opportunities across broadcasting, streaming, and creator media sectors. Marking its largest edition yet, BCM 2026 has brought over around 700 companies from 55 countries for international networking. One of the most closely watched developments is the first official participation of the China Pavilion, signaling the potential for broader cultural and content industry exchanges. Emerging markets such as Mongolia and Romania took part in the event, while broadcasters and media companies including Arirang TV also met with content producers and distributors.
The basic role of the market is to provide a preview of works that will be released later in the year. Many projects introduced here have become major hits. Looking ahead to our 30th anniversary, we hope to grow into a marketplace attracting participants from around 100 countries and some 10,000 buyers and sellers.
Running through Friday in Busan, BCM 2026 is celebrating 2 decades since its launch in 2007 and reaffirming its status as one of Asia's premier content trading platforms. Cho Young-un, Arirang News, Busan.
Clouds cover and showers kept temperatures cooler today. Scattered showers will continue through this evening across inland areas. Tomorrow, central and northern inland areas, as well as mountainous areas of Gangwon-do province, will see light showers of 5 to 10 millimeters. Meanwhile, South Korea opens its World Cup group stage tomorrow. The game kicks off at 11 a.m. Korea time, and large crowds are expected at fan park events across the country. Skies stay mostly sunny, so weather conditions should not disrupt outdoor activities. Temperatures will rise from tomorrow, reaching around 30 degrees Celsius by Saturday, bringing back the summer-like heat. Tomorrow's Seoul will start the day at 16 degrees Celsius, Chuncheon at 13 degrees, Daejeon at 15 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 28 degrees, Daegu at 30 degrees, Gwangju at 29 degrees. Looking ahead to Sunday, rain moves to Jeju Island. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up next, our daily panel session during which we address the President's Europe tour again. Thank you for now.
Across borders, surging forward without limits, Korea. Korean culture has moved beyond a passing trend, becoming a force that colors the world. And perhaps its origins trace much further back into our own history. The true roots where this vast chronicle began, where the essence of K-power and the spirit of our people are recorded. In the 17 seconds you casually pass by, thousands of years are breathing within. The moment your gaze lingers and your curiosity is stirred, the radiant faces of our history begin to awaken. The real stories of these artifacts, stories we never knew. It begins here, now.
끝없이 주워가면서 바로 잡고 있는데 다시 그 밤이 오면 지금의 마음을 담아 떠나던 너의 손을 혹시나 어려운 일들이 있다면 어떤 벽이든 괜찮아 우린 넘을 테니까 언제나 내 맘을 그댈
President Lee Jae-myung is in Italy, meeting with leaders there as part of his Europe tour, which comes amid growing demand for Korean chips, ships, tanks, and even beauty products. We have more on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to yet another edition of Press Perspective. It's Thursday, June 11th here in Seoul. I'm Bin Sun-hee. Today we continue our coverage of the President's 10-day tour of Europe and also touch upon the global demand for K-beauty products. For this, I have independent journalist Kelly Kasulis-Jo here in the studio. Kelly, it's great to have you here.
Always happy to be here, thanks.
I also have Chloe Bogno with French broadcaster France 24 in the studio. Chloe, welcome back.
Hello, thank you for having me.
All right, Kelly, we start with you. So as I mentioned in the short clip, President Lee Jae-myung is in Italy as we speak. He's sitting down with his counterparts there. While we wait for details of the summit taking place as we speak, let's start off perhaps with the broader relevance of this latest diplomatic mission to Europe for President Lee Jae-myung and for South Korea, of course, in terms of security as well as economy.
Yeah, President Lee, he left on Tuesday. It's supposed to be a 10-day trip to Europe. Sounds pretty glamorous to me, but I think he's, only up to business while he's there. He's supposed to go to Italy, the Vatican, I believe Belgium, and then ultimately the G7 summit in France, which I think is really the showpiece of this trip, right? So in terms of what his priorities might be, I think it's interesting. I think South Korea has gotten a lot more self-confident about its place on the global stage and the kind of influence it can exact around the world. And so you're seeing more and more in the last couple of presidential administrations, it really trying to have a presence in Europe. We saw that even previously with President Yoon with the Ukraine war as well, taking a stance and visiting Europe on diplomatic endeavors. So I find that interesting. In my 10 years here, you don't hear about a South Korean president on such a long tour to Europe that often. And so there's this kind of overall greater shift happening. Now, why are they there? I think that, they want to work on the critical minerals issue. There might be some collaboration with energy. South Korea is an export-driven economy. Its economy has been growing at slower rates in previous years. And in 2020 or around the pandemic, you really saw a shift where a lot of big Korean firms were trying to make money, not just in the Chinese market or the Southeast Asian market, but more in Western countries, the United States and Europe. So it's really beneficial for Korea to kind of build those economic partnerships. As I mentioned, the energy crisis, I think this is one of Korea's biggest diplomatic fronts. You see a lot of engagement with the Middle East and Gulf countries lately. And I think hopefully, they're trying to have a meeting with President Trump as well. So a lot of things. Security. South Korea is probably at kind of, I don't want to say rock bottom, but maybe close in terms of its prospects of engaging with North Korea. Its security alliance with the U.S. still exists, but there's always a little bit of uncertainty injected in that since President Trump took his second term. And so also just building more of like a rapport in terms of defense and security, I think will be important.
Right then, Chloe, as Kelly mentioned, President Lee Jae-myung's 10-day four-nation tour of Europe began in Belgium. It ends in France next week, where he joins his global counterparts for this year's G7 summit. That being said, how does South Korea contribute to the G7 gathering, of course, keeping in mind the latest geopolitical concerns?
Yeah, so the G7 will be in Evian in France for 3 days. Along with South Korea, there are other countries that have been invited. So India, Brazil, Kenya, and then Volodymyr Zelensky, obviously for the Ukraine part, has been invited to talk about the ongoing Russian war in Ukraine. And then there's the 7 of the G7, so Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the UK, and the US. So what could be the role of South Korea? I think we have to kind of refer back to Canada Prime Minister Mark Carney in Davos at the beginning of the year. He was speaking in his speech about the role of the voice of the middle countries. I won't quote him exactly, but he was saying something to the side of, if you don't want to be eaten by the big countries, you need, as middle countries, we need to ally. And I feel like it's probably what's going to happen is in this event of the G7 would be like middle ground countries
like South Korea, like Canada, would be having another voice to the chapter and trying perhaps to give another point of view, especially right now, as Kelly was saying, with the geopolitical crisis in the Middle East, with the war in Ukraine as well, with how everything is evolving. It's important to have other voices who are able to gather together and speak from a different point of view. Obviously, South Korea will be also representing the Indo-Pacific region alongside Japan, India, and I mean, if we want to please the United States, we can also put them in the Indo-Pacific countries as they are wanting to be part of them. So there's this idea of trying also to kind of shift a little bit the focus that has been quite a lot on Europe and the US, and trying to remember that there are other countries. It's also something that France has been saying when they took the presidency of G7, the idea of rekindling the meeting as the original spirit of the group. That would be a forum where the major powers can discuss together to address the economic challenges of the world. And we like said about the European tour, so not only about the G7, but more on the European tour itself, that it would be helping to expand President Lee Jae-myung administration diplomatic outreach to Europe, but also increasing Seoul's participation in discussion on key issues on international community. So let's see if they are able to address that at the G7.
You're right indeed. Kelly, I'd like to circle back to something you mentioned earlier. So there are hopes here within the administration here that President Lee Jae-myung will be able to sit down with his US counterpart Donald Trump on the sidelines of the G7 summit in France next week. What do you suppose are the prospects of that particular engagement?
It's always hard to tell. So I've been through a few of these at this point. For whatever reason, it's always left up to mystery until the last minute whether these leaders will meet at something like the G7 or the G10 or the G20. And then there's a lot of hoopla about what they might talk about. And then often these meetings are like, 15 minutes? There's only so much that you can accomplish on these sidebars, if you will. But I think there are a few things that Korea really wants to get across, and they're mostly related to Iran, China, and North Korea, right? So with Iran, I mean, as we've established over the last few months, more than 70% of South Korea's energy supply is moving through the Strait of Hormuz. South Korea has avoided disaster, but has, reached choking points in certain moments since this war began, and so that's been a real concern. North Korea has been signaling a much deeper relationship in recent years with Russia, which is not good news for anybody in light of the Ukraine war. Obviously, they have a lot of engagement with China. South Korea is increasingly stuck in this tenuous place where China, one of its greatest, trade partners, is becoming more adversarial with the United States. And a lot of this kind of sits in Trump or Washington's playbook. I mean, they're really in control over whether or not this war with Iran continues, or how South Korea might get pulled into some kind of pressure, some kind of deal regarding China and North Korea. Lee Jae-myung, I think, really wants to engage with the North. And speaking to analysts, they all say that it's essentially up to Trump to engage with North Korea first. I mean, North Korea has made it pretty clear that they would maybe talk to Washington. It sounds pretty far-fetched, but they're not interested in speaking with South Korea at all. So there's a lot of gets that South Korea is trying to have. And then there's a lot of things that need to be followed up upon, like when they were renegotiating the trade deal, there were certain agreements for industry and economic partnerships, but a lot of those details have not really been hammered down, at least in the public eye. So there's a lot going on, but realistically, I doubt they'll have more than an hour, so I don't know how much can really be done. And of course, there's constant back-channel communications as well. So it might just be a nice little face-to-face. We'll see.
I think 15 minutes would be long enough. I believe the last contact among defense ministers of South Korea, Japan, and the US took 5 minutes on the sidelines of the Shangri-La dialogue.
Right, and 2.5 is probably shaking hands and saying, how are your kids, right? So
you are so right, that's true. And Chloe, speaking of sideline summits, there is talk about French President Emmanuel Macron preparing a lavish event for his US counterpart on the sidelines of this year's G7. Could you tell us a bit about the preparations and its purpose?
Yeah, so for the purpose, it's kind of clear that it would be to try to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't bail on the G7, or that he doesn't, leave early like he did last time, actually in 2025 in Canada. He left a day earlier than expected. He was supposed to meet with Volodymyr Zelensky, but he just went like, I have to go somewhere else. And he just left without kind of no explanation actually on what was going on. So he's kind of known for doing that, like getting the deals he needs to, or talking to the people he needs to, and then leaving. He did the same with the APEC summit actually, where he left before the actual beginning of the summit recently. So what was said is one of the ideas would be to woo him so that he would be able to come and staying until the end to get to this event. So that's according to our colleagues from Politico. In one article, they were saying like, there's a private dinner at the Palace of Versailles that's getting organized. Nothing is set in stone, nothing is really done, but apparently, according to the sources, it's what would be happening probably. So that would be on the 17th, so right at the end of the G7 summit, a kind of more private, intimate dinner. It's kind of Palace of Versailles, it was the house of the last French king, the Sun King Louis XIV, sorry. And then it's kind of one of the grandest displays that the French diplomacy can be doing, actually. It's a very impressive golden place. The king, the English king, King Charles III, was invited there. There was a big gala with nearly 200 guests. So that would probably not be to that scale with Donald Trump, probably more an intimate dinner, but still, it is one of the best homage that the French diplomacy can do. But according to political source, nothing is said. It could also, according to them, be a golf session at Evian-les-Bains, where the G7 is happening also. So yeah, it's just, as you can see, an idea of trying to get the US president to confirm that he's coming, because let's also remember that the G7 was supposed to happen a bit earlier than that, and still also, according to Politico at the time, Emmanuel Macron had to move the summit because of the president wanted to see a catch game on his 80th birthday. And
this is President Donald Trump.
President Donald Trump, sorry, wanting to see the catch game for his 80th birthday in the US, so making sure that he can have the both going on without problem with the agenda.
Right, so the date was moved, I see. What we know for now, though, is President Emmanuel Macron, he's putting on a charm offensive, if you will, for his US counterpart. Kelly, let's move forward. Now, President Lee Jae-myung's latest diplomatic tour to Europe, it comes against the backdrop of growing global demand for Korean beauty products. In fact, I believe in late May, Korean beauty retailer Olive Young, it opened its first US store. What has been the public response to this Korean venture thus far?
Yeah, it's been pretty big. They opened the store in Pasadena, California, which is an area, there's a lot of residential complexes that are filled with Asian Americans, so good market to start. But I believe I read that there were 6,000 people in line, so that would suggest that American beauty retailers like Sephora and Ulta, they might be really in for a run for their money in a couple of years. It's interesting to see this flip in the last 10 years that I've been here. Anything K-beauty people want. When I first was living here and I would go back to the United States, I would bring people the mask packs and they would like take photos in them, selfies, because they were like, what is this weird thing on my face? This is so hilarious. It was often the first time that they would see it. Now I wouldn't even bother to bring that to the United States because you can buy them there and they're all sourced from Korea. And so what we've seen since is an interest in Korean sunscreen, Korean cosmetics, Korean beauty procedures. I think the real hype for me was when Kim Kardashian flew here and took a bunch of pictures of herself doing K-beauty treatments. I really feel like that was the moment for the industry. And she came explicitly to do treatments, right? So it's really interesting to see. Back in the day, my Korean cousins would be like, could you bring me vitamins from America or from Germany, right? And now it's kind of the opposite. People also want Korean wellness products in the United States. So it seems like it's going to be the start of a really big business expansion. And as we know, Korean beauty, I think Korea is the second largest exporter of cosmetics in the world right now. So, you know, it's interesting. And actually, I can't talk about it too much, but I was just doing a piece about the Korean cosmetics industry. And one thing that I was told is that the pandemic was really the shift where we saw Korean beauty companies make a pivot to the US and Europe. So up until that point, a lot of the focus was on developing products for the Chinese market, meeting Chinese market regulations, and maybe a little bit of Southeast Asia. But the pandemic really gave these companies an opportunity to try to launch in the US, and that's where a lot of the business is now. It's worth noting that if you're buying an Innisfree product, let's say, or some Korean brand product in the United States, it may not compositionally be the same thing that you're getting in South Korea because the regulations are different. So when these companies make a product for a specific market, they have to change the formula often. And for certain types of products, they're actually regulated under the FDA, so as drugs, not cosmetics. And it's quite stringent and frankly bureaucratic. So a lot of the technology that has been developed in Korea for certain types of products is not transferable legally to the United States. So still, if people want, maybe they should take a trip here this summer, buy all their skincare, all
here
their
in South Korea,
and then go home with it. Yeah.
Right. Good to know. Good to know. Chloe, Olive Young's opening in the U.S. It comes following a business partnership with beauty retailer Sephora. Could you tell us a bit more about this partnership and its broader implications?
Yeah, so Olive Young is the part of the CG group. It's here the leading player in South Korea for the beauty and health actually store industry. And Sephora is kind of the same player actually, but for France. It was developed in 1969. It's now part of the LVMH group. So it's kind of luxury, tending to luxury, but still when you go into a Sephora shop, it's mostly affordable beauty and cosmetic elements that you could get. And actually, the way I'm describing for my French friend when they're coming to Olive Young, I'm saying, oh, it's kind of like Sephora. So the two are really similar players. And it's true that their partnership was announced in January 2026, so this year. And they're starting to rolling this autumn. So what's going to happen is that they will have a few physical shop, like into the Sephora shops, there will be corners for Olive Young creation of specific K-beauty elements. First in the US, in Canada, Hong Kong, and then in Southeast Asia. And then they were saying that it would be expansion probably in 2027 to the Middle East, the UK, Australia. So that would be online and offline stuff. So interesting to see that it's not going to France yet, even though there is still, when you go to France, you can still already find some of the K-beauty products. Not at the same price, I have to say. The same thing as my friend was still asking me if I can help them with this. But the idea would be to provide Sephora customers with a dedicated zone. And it's kind of a win-win partnership on this because Olive Young is being able to use the platform of Sephora, Sephora being recognized as one of the good beauty luxury products so that that can be trusted, so they can play on this to get into new markets. And on the other side, Sephora is also riding the K-beauty wave, actually, and being able to show that to their customers. And it's true that we can see that when Sephora tried to come into South Korea, the two shops were actually in competition, and Sephora was not able to keep going into the country. They tried for 4 years. They opened, I think, 6 shops here in Seoul. And then in 2024, they said that they were stopping it because they were not able to match Olive Young here in Korea. So it's interesting to see that now they decided to go more like towards a partnership together.
Right, so it might turn out to be a win-win strategy for them here in Korea again then. Kelly, South Korea, as you mentioned earlier, it now stands as number 2 in terms of global cosmetics exports. Could you tell us a bit more about the rankings? Korea standing second, I believe France is first, and Korea surpassed the US. Could you tell us a bit more?
Yeah, that data is according to the Ministry of Trade. So my understanding is that South Korea, like you said, is the second largest exporter, and East Asian countries, their exports have increased about 12% over the last year. But I mean, the figures really don't compare to France at all. Yet France is still the most famous in terms of, for whatever reason, French beauty products are the it thing. What's been interesting to me is that I actually found out that, for instance, a lot of French brands actually source their products and formulas from Korean manufacturers. But these are closed-door deals, so it's not publicized. But, your French, sunscreen or cosmetics, your skincare could actually be from South Korea and then shipped to France and finished there. Part of the reason is because they have a similar regulatory framework, and they're both very advanced in terms of their technology. In fact, my understanding is both the K-beauty in the French F-beauty industry, they do a lot of scientific research and collaboration together. So actually that partnership is becoming closer and closer. So I don't know if the figures necessarily correctly reflect that. And then there's the other reality that a lot of this data is kind of made off kilter by China's role in the market, and China does a lot of counterfeit and dupe skincare goods. It has been reported that some of the tourist shops in Seoul, for instance, that sell Korean skincare have been accused of actually using Chinese dupes. So in the same way that you can buy a fake Chanel bag, maybe you're accidentally buying a fake Korean skincare product, but that hasn't really been proven. I think what's interesting is that South Korea's 2025 imports for cosmetics has actually declined, which again, this is purely anecdotal. But when I first came here, I mean, the irony was, and I heard many of my South Korean friends joke about this, is that Americans come here and they want to buy Nature Republic, Innisfree, like Tony Moly at the time, remember how big that was, a Tweed House. But Korean people are trying to buy L'Oreal, Aveeno, you know, these also American brands. And so there was that kind of weird dichotomy, and I think a lot of the time it was like the American products or the French products were more expensive, so they were seen as a premium, and a lot of K-beauty was very cheap at that time. Now, I mean, there's a very expensive K-beauty. I won't say what I use, but one tube of my like daily moisturizer is like 40,000 won, so like maybe 25, 30 US dollars, right? So the idea that K-beauty is advanced and it's expensive and actually you're better to consume products from your own country, I think that's changing here.
Right, for sure. Chloe, we have like about a minute left. How do you explain the growing global popularity of K-beauty products?
So I would say that the few things, like if you look at the international markets, first thing is that the K-beauty products are quite innovative. I don't know, like in the recent year we have seen, for example, the micro needling that is into a cream, or like the new things where they were doing like vitamin C capsules so that it doesn't kind of get old until you break it on your skin. That's part of it, obviously. Then I would say marketing through the Hallyu, the Korean wave, is very strong. I mean, I've been watching one of the random K-drama recently, and at the very end of it was a very big, like, product advertisement for the very famous orange Korean brand that used ginseng, and the lady is really like showing it like this to the camera. And obviously, if you're a foreigner interested in Korea watching K-dramas and you have this actress with a perfect skin, obviously you want to use the same thing as she is using. So I think that's a very good marketing tricks. And the last thing is obviously, as you were saying actually, Kelly, the ingredients that are being used are quite innovative, quite natural, and quite new for a lot of people, where you'll be mostly like focusing on ingredients rather than the effects themselves, and you're kind of supposed to know by yourself what you need for your skin. So that's probably what's making it so much of a hit at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. Words like green tea, black tea, jeju orange, tangerine or something, right? All right, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Chloe, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
Kelly, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, that brings us to the end of Thursday's edition of Press Perspective. We return same time tomorrow, that is Friday, with more panel discussion, this time on K-culture here and elsewhere. Join us then. Thank you for now.
The world is no longer connected.
We are moving in different directions.
How far and fast can this actually go?
No more declarations.
We need to turn these promises into reality.
It's breaking apart.
If everything is divided, can we still find peace?
This is how we reinvent cooperation.
얘들아, 잠깐만. 우리 뭐 좀 까먹은 거 같지 않아?
How to survive in Korea. Workplace. Step 1. Lunchtime. The most important morning routine is to check today's menu. Food is essential for survival. Memorize today's menu. The highlight of office life. Lunchtime. Rice in the bottom left, soup in the bottom right. The top is for the sides. The sauce and the spoon go here. This is the basic layout, but it's a bit odd to switch rice and soup. When you're done, pour the leftovers into the soup bowl. It doesn't look that appetizing, so wait until others are done eating. Step 2. Neng, nep, nenep. These are the most used expressions at work. Choose the most appropriate form. Neng, nep, nenep. Remember that the formal ne can sound a bit stiff. Did you just say yes? Absolutely not acceptable. You want to find the right word for the right occasion. Step 3. Desteria. Desteria is the oasis in the desert. Show them your character. If you're not the diligent type, get a stooky plant. Work is tough. Laugh and the whole world laughs with you. Weep and you weep alone. Stay put, like the stooky that survives in the desert. Hang in there until the end. Of course,